All right. Well, thank you all for bearing with us. Welcome to the October 2023 AMA. We've got quite the panel here for you today. We've got Gene, as you all know, CEO of CNI over here. We got Cameron, head of product, and of course, your friendly neighborhood security guy, Justin. So, yeah, I think we're going to dive right into it. We've actually got a lot of pretty interesting and intense topics to cover today, so should be pretty fun. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat there. There's a QA section. You can click that and type your questions. All right. I guess kicking things off here. Let me open up my notes. Sorry. Messed up everything when I was taking care of technical difficulties. All right. First question we got here. Can you provide any update or any details on the XCH coin sales?
So we have sold a small amount of coins. We expect to sell a small amount more. Market seems to have not cared in any way, and we're very happy about that. However, we are going to be looking at all sorts of different methods to continue to finance the company. But for right now, we feel very comfortable with what's in front of us. And at this kind of spend level, we have a very, very long runway. So, kind of excited about how that's gone, and, expect that to continue to be an option that we use. But as I said, a very, very small amount.
Awesome. Yeah. Any news on the ETH bridge? Is it going to be live by summer next year?
I think summer of next year is a safe estimate, Cameron.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe estimate. Yeah, we're really wrapping up development right now. We had some kind of delays in development, which is sort of, I guess, to be expected, or at least not avoided. And yeah, we're wrapping up development, and we're hoping to get into testnet with some validators pretty soon here. So yeah, things are coming along. Definitely looking good for next summer.
Cool. And by next summer, we probably mean sooner than that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Next summer. Yeah. Okay. Could you please provide approximate dates for IPO? No, probably not.
Yeah, look, I can certainly comment on the IPO. So, to recap, because people keep asking the same questions, we had engaged with Credit Suisse as our underwriter. That is a project that went down during Q4 of last year. We were comfortable with that because at the time they were very credibly expecting to spin out of Credit Suisse and become First Boston again. The project to complete our first draft filing is a large project. If anybody's not done that before, it is months. And so we were just about ready to file when the CS-UBS merger was forced by the Swiss government. So, we had no choice but to continue to file. We weren't sure whether the spin out would happen or not. Obviously, that got killed by the UBS side of that deal. And then there was some uncertainty about whether they'd go forward, and the UBS ended up canceling a whole bunch of Credit Suisse's projects and deals that were in the pipeline. Now, almost all of those CS bankers have gone to other places, and they still love us. And so, we do have new institutions that are going to be serving that role. Generally, you can't comment on your underwriter. It's kind of a weird thing when the underwriter goes belly up that you can kind of comment because they're not there anymore. But once we, what's called turn public in the Edgar side, you'll be able to see the kind of history and who it was and what we're doing. And also it's to note that these days, the kind of final syndicate doesn't come together until right before you price. So whoever you're working with, usually have folks that are interested around the periphery that will likely be involved in the deal, but aren't formally in the deal yet. A comment on the macro environment. First of all, I think most economists are crazy right now. 4.9 GDP growth last quarter tells me a story that we're not going to have a recession next quarter, every quarter for the last 5 quarters. But it is also a kind of novel environment. The way the Federal Reserve works has changed pretty radically since 2008. And so how do interest rates and stocks trade against each other is actually kind of an interesting challenge. So, I think those of us on the, company and investment banking side had hoped that the recent spate of IPOs would have traded a little better in the aftermarket. So I think that's kind of a negative headwind. But at the same time, I think the macro environment and maybe the end of nuclear winter here in crypto could change things. I just think it means it's more a next year kind of timeline. But we continue to move forward with our SEC process and want to be ready when that market starts to get better. So that's the long answer to all the IPO questions people have, I hope.
Cool. Awesome. Next up, we've got there have been a bunch of glitches in some pools. When when the Time Lords have come online, I believe that's on testnet is what they're referring to. If someone would create 2 times faster Time Lord, when they could spam the network to kick off some of the pools, or then they could spam the network to kick off some of the pools and farmers. Justin, I think that's probably one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, not to say that a 2 times faster Time Lord isn't ever possible in the future. I would say that in the near term, that is an incredibly unlikely outcome. This right here, this is the board that comes inside the Time Lords that you've seen the pictures of online. I promised some people on Keybase or on Discord that I would show it on the AMA, so I'll take the opportunity to show that.
It exists.
That right there is theoretically the fastest computer for doing VDF math that can exist. You could probably invest $60 million and try to take a swing at making a smaller version of that may run more efficiently and thus a little bit faster. I don't think, based on the research that we did and the opinion of our partners, that that's feasible for probably 4 to 5 years. At the 5-year mark, we probably will be looking at a revision 2 of this hardware, which, then the 2 times a theoretical 2 times faster Time Lord would be the same pattern we're using for these Time Lords now. I would be surprised if it's 2 times faster, though, even with a Rev 2. These are pretty to the bone for like how fast electrons can move through logic gates. To address the other question, there are games that you could play if you theoretically had a faster Time Lord. The most annoying one would be turning it on for a week and turning it off periodically. That would cause difficulty to kind of roller coaster all over the place, which is why having many Time Lords that are honest kind of mitigates that. There are other things you can do, like keep difficulty artificially high for short periods by like under-tuning and then over-tuning, kind of like what we're doing, but as an attack. So you can like throttle it up and down to kind of mess with the rate of signage points. The thing about our consensus, though, is that it is self-correcting. And so over a long enough time, as long as there is someone who can run a comparable set of hardware, that attack becomes vanishingly hard to pull off. Because an honest Time Lord that's running near as fast, which I think is theoretically the only things that are going to exist are these ones, mitigates all that risk. So yes, there are some games you could play, but it would be a very expensive thing to do. And it's not like, we would probably hear about TSMC making some more ASIC Time Lords for someone else.
There are only so many people that know how to do this little bit.
Yeah.
I think there's like 3 teams on the planet right now.
All right. Can you give us any details about your strategy in regards to the BladeBit plotter? Is Harold still on the team? Is he working on BladeBit? What's he doing in relation to case size, plots? Yeah.
Yep. So the quick answer is Harold's absolutely on the team. We are doing a couple different things there. We want to make it so that third-party plotters can not need to depend on our node specifically or their own private node, so they could actually use the CNI ship node, letting farmers sign. But we also do expect to, slowly but surely, take some of the advancements we're seeing in the environment and get them into our open source. But, because we are a little bit resource limited, it's not going to be super fast. But obviously, over the long haul, we think it's best to have good reference open source for the entire plotting process. Cameron, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that that's right on. We're going to continue developing BladeBit, but we think a nearer term, higher priority item is to make it so that third-party plotters can work compatibly with everything we've got. So I think that's where we're going to focus and get support for that, and then we'll continue to work on BladeBit.
Okay, awesome. Could you elaborate further on the issuance of a loan to the market maker in the form of the 1.3 million pre-farm XCH? How is this expected to influence the token price? Does the team plan to utilize the pre-farm tokens for this purchase and beyond?
So there was not a $1.3 million loan. The total number of coins has been sent out from the pre-farm is 200,000 XCH. The vast majority of that was a loan to the market maker to make markets. They have just recently come into the market. So, you're seeing some of that post, last couple of days have been, I think, a bit cleaner in the market sense. And, that's it. That's so far the total amount of Chia that has actually moved out of the pre-farm. So, we're talking about very, very small amounts that are in our hot wallet that we may be selling.
Cool. Awesome. I think you've already basically answered this one, but just to really
again,
nail in the coffin here. Does the project have sufficient funding in fiat currency? That question just disappeared on my.
do we have sufficient funding? And let me just answer it this way. Unless there's some material adverse change in like the markets, we have multiple ways that we can continue to fund the company pretty much indefinitely right now. That is not where we were before all of this. And I think it's important that the community understand that we're now in a place where we're not really having any impact on the market other than the good, positive impact we should be having, and have additional other ways that we can finance the business. I mean, one of the weird things that was going on here is because of the failure of FTX, a lot of investors are very shy about giving tokens value. And unfortunately, one of the things we kind of had to do here was prove that the token actually has value. And we've been able to do that in a, material to the investor, but immaterial to the market way. So that's actually opened up some additional new opportunities. And, we have a couple different options we're looking at. The whole point being that, we could do nothing right now and continue to sustain this level of development pretty much indefinitely.
Can I add a note to that in that same topic? There's been a lot of discussion about 1.3 million Chia moving from the pre-farm and how much Chia has actually moved. You can track on chain with the open source tools. We even have some blog posts and some documentation written about how to verify where the pre-farm coins are, and you can look at the transaction history for those wallet addresses. You can see exactly how many Chia have moved. I've been seeing a lot of spooky stories floating around about how much Chia is moving around out of the pre-farm. You can 100% validate that on chain right now. Go look at it. Don't trust, verify. So I hope that helps kind of quell everybody's concerns.
Yeah. Seeing a lot of questions all along these same lines, so I'm just going to kind of sort it all into one big one. How are timelines affected given the recent 1/3 staff cut, and what's going on there? What do we expect to see?
I think you're going to see us be about 10% less fast. We intentionally designed the layoffs to be as minimal impact on the core delivery of, the primitives, vaults, all the pieces we need around Enterprise Wallet. It is very much, sustaining and maintaining our ability to close a, late stage pipeline of what are very important new real world use cases that need a lot of that development. So, places where farmers are going to feel that, obviously, though Clyde Wallace does an amazing job, there's a lot less farmer support. That was one of the places where we had to make a tough decision. We still have Harold working on it, but obviously JM is now part-time on that. So there's going to be a little bit less resource overall, but, we're going to continue to work on that and develop. And the other thing is, especially some of the more unique things around plotting, how do I put this? Even though some people were unfortunately in the layoff, people are still around and still kind of doing stuff as part of the Chia community. I love that. I thank you. And, we hope to, as we continue to grow, pull a lot of those sort of folks back in. But, I think that the overall impact on how fast we're going to go isn't that heavy. It's some, but it's not very material.
Awesome. Justin, I think this one's probably for you. Saw some discussion around 2 different metrics for tracking the Nakamoto coefficient because of the way certain closed source farming currently works. Will this go back up when the open source protocol can integrate with the closed source farming software?
To answer the second part first, yes. The goal is that we will go back to everybody can run a node locally and use, a closed sourced or open sourced alternative farming and harvesting setup. Our goal has always been extensibility in the ecosystem and to meet, the people who participate where they're at. So we're happy to work with, both of the now infamous, providers of node software in the ecosystem. The first part of the question was, again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was just the 2 different metrics.
Yeah. So the way that the Nakamoto coefficient is being tracked was kind of misrepresenting kind of how decentralized we actually are, because we were tracking it based on who was winning blocks. Because as long as you're signing your own blocks, you show up in the time chain record of, this is a decentralized chain because this many people win this many blocks over a given, Poisson distribution. I won't bore you guys with the statistics there, but statistically that's how we're calculating Nakamoto consensus. We have taken a factor for what the pool fee max is collecting is, because people have been moving over to his software because it's very popular, super great software, runs really well. And so we added the additional Nakamoto consensus number, the one that's adjusted to account for the pool fees that are flowing to him, which are actually individual farmers still running their own nodes. And so that's kind of where the discrepancy is. And we didn't want to misrepresent it and just show our adjusted number. We wanted to show the true number as well, just for transparency's sake.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one for you, Justin. Is the Raspberry Pi 4 still the low end target, or should we start looking at investing in 5s?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can kind of open this up to Cameron as well, as this is kind of, where he's steering the ship. But as far as I know, RPi 4 is still our, low end target. We are doing things like ramping up Time Lords slowly, trying to be as gentle as we can when we release new opcodes and that sort of thing, so that we can gently ease in heavier loads onto the lower end Pis and Pi 4s and all that. And I'll, Cameron, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so like you said, 4 is still the floor, but we are looking at the 5. One of the things that we've got going on is we actually want to remove the block size limits. Right now, we're only filling them up to 50%, and that's a restriction that we want to remove over time. We are making improvements that may make that possible with the 4, but if moving to the 5 is something that's required to do that, I think that's on the table for us.
Yeah, the way we kind of think about it is, for 150 or less bucks, you should be able to buy a, cheap energy efficient machine with an SSD that can keep up and will, survive for the blockchain growth overall. That's probably going to be the 5 soon because, we kind of don't want to overly constrain, what we're trying to do. But, at the same time, we're not going to be moving radically different from a total load perspective. So, those 10-year-old iMacs are still going to be quite good if you install Linux on them.
Awesome. Cameron, I think this one's for you. Is there anywhere that lists the planned launch features and capabilities of the DAO primitive?
Yeah, so we're putting together the documentation right now. We're really getting close to wrapping up that effort. We'll publish it, so we'll have it available for you then. Yeah, we're kind of in the final phases of audits and bug fixes. So we're really looking forward to getting the DAOs out there.
Awesome. Gene, I'm throwing this one at you. Have the staffing and funding changes adversely impacted the relationship with any of the soon TM pipeline projects?
Not at all. And especially, large enterprises certainly understand. And we're like, sorry, glad to see all the people we're interfacing with are not affected. Let's keep going. So, in this world, I think people understand the macro environment, understand this move. And for them, it's actually comforting that, we don't have a real, cash out risk and can be there to support them in the long haul.
Awesome. Is the grant program on hold following the layoffs?
So yes, kind of. There are small things that we're still totally open to doing. Your contact on that is Eric. I will tell you, I'm not happy with how our grant program went. I see too many people kind of like hand out, no planning for the future. So we're thinking about different ways to restart that. I will also say there may be some very small numbers of grant recipients or partners that would use Chia XCH with. That'll be very, very limited, but there are a couple things that make some sense. And so don't be surprised if you see us do that. One of the things we're thinking about is maybe becoming co-investors because we kind of like the process where we've got seed investors doing that vetting and we're helping kind of make that $1 or 50 cents more per dollar or something like that. So, I think we're interested, but I think, the kind of classic grant program that we've seen in other projects has generally been very short-term focused, has been generally kind of pump and dump style. And, this is a long-term project. So, we're excited about people who build things that are going to last and we want to help those. And there's definitely flexibility in smaller ways. There are things like helping with hosting. There's other things like that we certainly want to do. But I think we need to reinvent the grant program. And, I'm not comfortable with how it ran in the past, honestly. Now, one of the things we definitely are thinking about doing, and this is going to be shorter term, is some piecemeal stuff where it's like, look, if you did X, Y, and Z, we'd be willing to pay, Q for it. An example of that is what Isabel just did with BTC Pay Server. That was one of the things that, he joked, I've been hearing Gene ask about that all the time, so I'll just go do it, darn it. And he did. Unfortunately, he's got to port it to a new plugin architecture they're just building, but hey. So anyway, it's those kinds of things where there are little one-off things that don't have a whole lot of downstream support that we'd be interested in. But that's going to be a couple months before we kind of implement something like that.
Awesome. Do you have any updates on XCH listing on exchanges?
We continue to talk to all sorts of exchanges and have had all sorts of interesting conversations, but they're all wildly under NDA.
Awesome.
I mean, I would step back and say one thing. We are acutely concerned with making sure that the on-ramps and off-ramps get better for everybody around the world. If you're not in the US, it's actually pretty good. If you're in the US, it's a pain. And so between the bridge, Stably relaunch, some other partners we're working with, we want to make it so that you really can get from USD to XCH and vice versa, to buy an NFT, to participate in a DAO, to do, buy a carbon credit. Like these are important things, both to, both sides of the barbell, all you degens and farmers and crazy men out there, and frankly, a lot of our Carbon customers are going to want to be able to have the ability to transact in wrapped USDC or USDS. So,
All right, we're getting a lot of Time Lord
I
questions.
have a question for Gene, actually.
Go for it.
This is about Blue Box Time Lords. This came up on Discord, but someone asked, with regard to Blue Box Time Lords, when the proofs are compacted, where are those stored? And then the second follow-on to that is, this also brings me to the question of the 3 VDF chains, the 3 heads and their foliage. Where are those stored? And shouldn't compactifying proofs from the main time chain in some way invalidate the current chain? Or does that change the cryptographic data in some way?
okay. So the Chia blockchain is 3 blockchains. Those 3 blockchains are all tied together by the time chains. The time proofs of time. So when you have like even the ASIC time lord, when it spits out an answer, this is the final number in my proof of time, the host machine is actually generating the proof. That proof is much quicker to be able to verify, obviously, than having to run all the iterations that were just done. For original performance sake, we chose a compression version of that proof, which is not fully compressed. It is close. It's like in Lazowski 1, I believe it is. So it is still a valid proof, though. So in other words, when you look at that proof of time and you compare it to its source and you look at the proof will validate. It'll just validate a bit slower because it's a slower generated proof. If you create the more compact version of the exact same proof, it is the same proof in the sense that when you validate it as a proof of time, it proves the correct amount of iterations. It is not exactly the same. So in other words, you're not looking at a hash of the proof when the chain is looking at, is this valid? The chain is instead analyzing whether the proof of time is valid for the input that came from the, proof of work, proof of space that it started from, or the epoch end that it began from. So you are actually calculating the proof of time and the proof of space alternately and proving to yourself that they continue to match. So it's not like Bitcoin where the entire block is signed across. It is that the components of the block are signed in certain parts. So like the foliage is where the payments go. That's signed by the plot key of that proof of space. So if that proof of space is valid for that proof of time, and that proof of time is valid for the previous proof of space, it's all completely valid. So yeah, it's mutable in the sense that you can change out the proof of space. In fact, you could put a worse proof of time in, and it still validate. It just validates slower. Now, there is some like longer term research that we need to do, which is that we may be at a place, especially the ASIC time lords, that we could actually do an Lazowski 0, which is a compact proof of time. And that would mean you wouldn't have to run blue boxes anymore. Not soon, not a high priority, but it is something we're looking at because it'd be very nice to just make that go away. And then the first version that everybody saw of the proof of time was the most compact possible.
Awesome. We have a ton of Time Lord questions. I'm going to throw them at you guys rapid fire. Justin, I think most of these are for you. But first, what's the power draw on the Time Lord?
I embarrassingly haven't run the numbers. The underlying hosts I've benched the entire host they run on. We benched them in London. They were drawing like 170 watts at idle, but that's like a big gaming rig. So, right, like the ASIC does not meaningfully add to the power draw of a modern gaming rig. I would say something probably in the 10 to 15 watt range if max. Like, and that's like a way overestimation probably.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are they plug and play?
Yes, absolutely. They're USB-C. As long as you have USB-A or C ports on your host machine, you can run them. I saw a question that was like, why both ports? One is for power, one is for data. We just didn't want to run power over the same bus as data. Electricity plus like logic electrons don't mix sometimes.
How many lights are on them?
Just one. Sadly, I think they look pretty BA to that question that Eric asked in Discord, but yeah, there's just the one power light on the board.
And how many are we actually planning to ship out to the community?
About 100. It's going to depend on the ones that we deploy, making it to where they need to go. I don't want to like promise that some don't get like broken in shipping or something, but we have about 100, a little over 100 available to the community. And once we get them, ready to ship out, we'll be able to give an exact number.
Are there any restrictions on shipping locations globally?
No,
unfortunately, a little bit.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Gene.
Yeah. So, obviously the export restricted places. So it can't send them to North Korea. It can't send them to Cuba. I knew there was a question from some of the Russian community. We're going to have to look. I will tell you that it could be problematic for us to ship them to Russia right now. But I think it's going to be pretty limited to that kind of list. I don't think we can send them to, for example, the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. It's those kinds of places the United States would be grumpy about, that we're going to have problems with. After that, we believe that we're going to be able to ship to most anywhere else on the planet. One of the important things we'll be analyzing with the applications to buy is generally where things will be located. So, we have a real incentive to make sure that these are kind of all over the planet. If that one farmer in Greenland is really interested, they should get in touch.
Awesome. All right, switching it up a little bit. Is Telegram fully trusted by CNI? Are there any pending areas of concern? Let's see. I think that this is kind of like three questions into one. So let's go with that.
So, I hesitate to use the word fully trusted because, they're not us, right? But no, do we believe that they have a strong product that's highly secure? Yeah, we do. I mean, I've got some of my own Chia locked in it already, to give you a sense. I love what our South American Ozone Wallet did to actually directly integrate and have real support for kind of the additional NFT capabilities and other primitives. And we, not first, but probably shortly following Vault, want to have this as part of an option for Vault as well. So, I think it's a really good hardware option. It is kind of a middle ground. It's not necessarily the most secure option, period, but it's a pretty darn secure option for things that like you care about, but you need to transact in.
Yeah, and kind of following along those same lines, are there any downsides that Tangem has for the actual end users?
The only thing I think that's out there is that I don't know that we're going to be compatible with their 24 word or 12 word import. And that's the only thing that's kind of weird because of all the weirdness over at the BLS IETF spec. So, other than that, and by the way, that may be fixable. We haven't looked at it. We may be able to support their version too. Kind of how we've done that with Knuckle, I believe it was. We added Knuckles 12 in. So, not necessarily a long-term problem, but thing is, the kind of Tangem model is that you don't really want to know your 24 words. That's kind of the point.
Awesome. There's been a lot of talk in the crypto industry about having stocks traded on a blockchain, thus creating a 24/7 market for securities. Is this something Chia Network is looking to delve into?
Yes. So credential restricted cats are step one on that process. There's another piece that real issuers need to be able to manage, which is if somebody loses a certificate, you have to basically be able to freeze and reissue. That's in the pipeline. We want to trade our own equity 24/7, 365 on our own blockchain. But we've also been actively involved with conversations with early and late stage startups where it's kind of interesting to do things like get employees liquidity in an open on-chain market. And offer files are kind of uniquely capable of being able to do that in a regulatory compliant way around the world. So yeah, we're excited about that. We are, building a couple pieces that are needed to really do that the exact right way. It turns out Delaware state law means that you couldn't just use a cat as equity in the United States because it's a bearer instrument. So you have to have a slightly more sophisticated cat that the issuer can manage a bit. So, if you lose your equity, say in CNI, you can go to our chief legal officer and post a bond and prove that you lost it, and we'll stop those old ones and issue new ones. That's kind of how it has to work. But we're excited about it. We think that there's a world in the future where you can kind of raise your initial funding, raise your interim funding, raise your late stage funding, give your early funding a little bit of liquidity, get your employees liquid. And then once you get to certain thresholds, you can decide whether you want to go to a national market or not, or just stay as a trading entity on a blockchain. And then just simply file with the SEC as required. Because, one of the things you can do is if you're a big enough company, it's kind of like a direct listing, except you don't actually list. You just file directly and become a filing entity, and you're now a public company trading legally on a public blockchain.
Awesome. Here's a kind of an interesting one that I don't think we've talked about for a while. So why ASIC Time Lords if Chia isn't proof of work?
So Time Lords are not proof of work. Part of the reason Time Lords exist is to keep proof of space becoming proof of work. Proof of space and time is really proof of work. The work is your plotting. So you do your plotting and then you amortize that plotting over the next years, right? Proof of time is required because otherwise proof of space has some of the same problems proof of stake does. There's kind of, quote, nothing at stake, which is a horrible term Bram hates because it's, assumes its assumption is correct. But what it boils down to is without proof of time, you as a large farmer could try to figure out which future chain was better for you. Like if you have two proofs of space that work, one may be better and more likely to lead back to you. And so a lot of the things we did in the new consensus that's currently the running consensus was to make it so that that became first really hard, that it required a lot of Time Lords. If you have about 100 Time Lords, you can pull down the 51% attack to about 43%. One of the nice things about ASIC Time Lords is there isn't more than a couple hundred ASIC Time Lords that exist, and functionally there's only about a third of that. And it's millions and millions and millions of dollars to either repeat this process or create a slightly better one. Ultimately, if you're an attacker, you'd like the slightly better one. That's probably about a $40 million spend for R&D and chip manufacturing. And when you're done, you'd probably be like 20% faster now. A lot of low-hanging fruit is in this current ASIC Time Lord. So, the network only requires one honest, fast ASIC Time Lord. That's it. We're going to have more than that because it's a decentralized system and we want it to be redundant. And when the Great Firewall of China has a burp, we don't want your Chinese farmers to not be able to make the longest chain while the American farmers are making a shorter chain. Like, that's a bad idea. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's what the ASIC Time Lords really do. The chain could run on 3 Raptor Lakes and 3 ASIC Time Lords. And that's all the power the chain requires. We'll probably have 30 times that total, so we're talking infinitesimal amounts of power used to run proof of time.
Awesome. Can someone comment on the recent Bitcoin Lightning vulnerability and discuss whether this type of vulnerability would probably would be provably absent in the Chia Lisp implementation?
Let's talk about covenants. So it turns out that Lightning 1.0, which you see on Bitcoin, needs a couple more opcodes to actually be secure and scalable. And, when you hear me talk about like Lightning 2 and Lightning 3, one of the things is PTLCs, which are better than hash time lock contracts. And I think the PTLCs aren't actually exposed to the vulnerability that's being talked about this past week. On Chia, because we have covenants, you couldn't do it. You'd basically covenant between Alice and Bob about how the transactions could come to chain, and so you can't kind of flush them and replace them with fee and all those sorts of things that you can do because Bitcoin can't do state very well. So when we talk about state channels and Lightning on Chia, because of Chia Lisp, everything that Lightning guys would really like to be able to do, you do out of the gate with Chia Lisp.
Awesome. Justin, how'd you get that jackalope on your wall there?
That is a 10-point whitetail buck from my days in Appalachia in my youth. So I chased him down and caught him with a net. That's how I got his horns.
Fair enough. All right. Let me look through here real quick. I'm almost out of questions, so keep submitting questions, everyone, if you've got them. Let's see. I think we're actually pretty much through everything. So we'll give it a minute here. If we don't see any more questions, we will.
There's the one question. Can you talk about the ASIC Time Lords and how the application process works? I can talk about that. So the applications are going to open on December 1st, this year, 2023, and they're going to close on January 1st of 2024. We're giving you guys plenty of advance notice so that you have about a month if you want to set up a 24/7 colo environment and apply to run an ASIC. That's absolutely go ahead. You don't necessarily need that either. The form will be published on December 1st. We'll get it in you guys' hands as soon as we can, and then we will select. The selection process is mostly going to be based on where you are in the world. We want to geographically distribute these as intelligently as possible, and then from there it will be trying to keep Time Lords out of more than a couple out of the same country, more than a couple out of the same city. Try to get them in the hands of people who make a strong case, right? Like maybe they're a big pool provider, maybe they're a big liquidity provider. I don't know. There's a lot of people that will probably apply, and we will weigh the merits of each of their situations against each other, and then we'll announce that we've selected winners and contact the buyers directly. We plan to have the Time Lords in everyone's hands by like the beginning of February of 2024.
Perfect. Awesome. Here's another good one, actually. Would CNI be open to licensing the IP logo name to non-for-profit community managed merchandise stores and things of that nature? T-shirts, hats, hoodies, etc.
I'm going to say not yet, and that's for a good reason. That maybe there'll be some news in this category soon. It's not fast, but things are moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I think unless anyone here has anything they want to bring up, I think we're going to probably call it here.
There was one question that I wanted to answer. People are kind of asking, why are we now comfortable that our sales of Chia don't turn into a security? And it's kind of three answers to that. First answer is our direct conversations with the SEC. In filing and getting responses, we have a much better understanding of where they're analyzing things and how. And when we run that analysis against Chia, it's pretty clear to us that it's been a commodity since the first transaction on chain. If you look at the circulating supply, for example, 99.99% of it is y'all farmers and not us. And that's one important point. But the bigger important point is we meet the 2019 guidance, which is we're sufficiently decentralized. And that is very true. I mean, if you look around, we have to now worry very much about, hey, is Mad Max and NoSSD going to implement the hard forks or the soft forks? And there are, I don't know, about 9 different competing, granted forks of our software, but fully functional forks of our software that have certain features that we don't support directly supported in them. Think, pooling in certain ways, other things like that. So, one of the important things to know is Bram and I decided to go off the deep end and say, hey, we're going to cut the farming rewards in half now and do that every 6 months. And we shipped that. I'm quite confident that someone in the community will fork it, remove that crap, and publish it. And we won't be the primary source of your farming and node software, and everything will move forward without us. Now, we don't want to do that. We enjoy, a more, how to put it, coalesced, it's not the right term for it. We like making it simple for people, and that would not make it as simple for people, but that also points to the point that, we can't go do some really controversial hard fork without really getting community buy-in. And, a lot of people haven't been around or watching this closely, but we've had one of Bram's chips just said no to. Now, funnily enough, one of our larger pools decided they liked it and implemented it. So, that's the kind of sign of decentralization, is that about 9% of validating nodes out there enforced the chip that we never actually adopted or put into our own software. So with that, we're very comfortable. And then we're taking a belt and suspenders project approach to this, which is we're making sure that we would otherwise be exempt from registration if the SEC were to disagree with us. So, we're not breaking any law. It doesn't imperil anything. And the third thing, and this is important, some people speculate that we're relying on the Ripple decision. We're not relying on the part of the Ripple decision that people think we're relying upon. We're relying both on how the both cases in the Southern District of New York, Terra Luna and Ripple, both judges have basically rejected the concept that, it's only a security. Certainly there are ways that you can end up making a token be a security for its entire lifetime, like CNI equity. But when you have these dual purpose things, it's more about the specific transaction. So even in Terra Luna, the judge was not willing to go to the mile of saying all Terra Luna transactions were security transactions. So from that perspective, we feel much more comfortable because, we don't really have a problem if the SEC ultimately takes the position that sales by us are securities. Well, okay, we'll do them in compliant and legal ways. And that's kind of why we want to be public, because it makes it even easier than what we do as a private company. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that we had real interesting market feedback, both from the judiciary and the SEC itself, that got us a lot more comfortable that we are kind of, other than Bitcoin, the only truly sufficiently decentralized blockchain out there. It turns out that the SEC cares about non-committal coefficient and things like that you would be surprised about, but they understand how this stuff works. And so from that perspective, a lot of the questions we got were, wow, can you further elaborate on how the heck that works? Because that is so different than everything else we've seen before.
You got a couple more here. So I see complaints about Chia List being hard and being a blocker for adoption. I think it's okay that important things are not something copy paste from somewhere, but do you see Chia List being a negative in your target audience so far?
In our target audience of enterprises, it's the only reason they'll talk to us. When you go look at major banks and big enterprises and governments, they're afraid of Solidity for good reason. I mean, you go look, and North Korea stole $1 billion in 2022 out of Solidity vulnerabilities. What we've seen is that anybody serious in the real world has instead run a private copy of Ethereum, because then they gate access, and that means North Koreans can't go pick the lock of your centralized monolithic smart contract in Ethereum. Now, version 1 of ChiaLisp was too hard. ChiaLisp 23 that Bram is working with Artie on is significantly improved. And you're going to see a real push from us to start showing people how much better it is, how much easier it is. First, we got to get our own developers on it. But it is a much improved language with a lot more of the core tooling that you expect from a language. I like to say I intentionally waited to learn ChiaLisp myself. It's a joke, but I'm really excited that I'm actually going to pick it up with ChiaLisp 23 because, having watched a lot of that development, it is really a better set of tooling. And, Art's built an amazing compiler that's actually compiling that down to the CLVM that was the original ChiaLisp, and sometimes better. So.
Awesome. Any insight on what L2 strategies can be, especially given that Lightning Network can't be completely relied upon? Interesting.
So Bram's view is that payment channels are the way to go. And in fact, he thinks that the over-indexing at Ethereum on rollups is not a really good idea. Now, we're probably going to have both. And the reason I say that is there are certain, especially like data layer applications where rollups make a ton of sense because you're already kind of dealing with the consortia. Your ordering isn't as scary. You want to be less latent, but ultimately you just want to update the chain a couple times a day, but versus the tens of thousands of updates you might make in the optimistic rollup. But the trading, the moving of money, the high value things are going to be in Lightning like payment channels, and they're going to be much more safe and flexible. Long term, one of the things we have with the pre-farm is the ability to make it easy to open a Lightning channel, and that's one of the things we've always looked at over the long haul that's real interesting and useful. But at the same time, about twice or three times a day now we hit the 50% block limit. We're going to move that back. So we're not super worried about it. One of the things we like about what Bram's doing with state channel gaming is that it really shows our longer viewed enterprise customers potentials, that there is a good set of solutions here to the extent they hit those kinds of scaling needs. And, we want to be able to demonstrate that to them very directly.
Awesome. If it takes 3 Time Lords to be fastest, what's the purpose of only having 1?
Well, so the speed difference is not that great that a single Time Lord that is closer and can chew through the proof, because it heard the gossip first, will not win sometimes. The speed difference is noticeable, so that most likely a cluster will be the fastest Time Lord most of the time. But that's just because of how network latency and gossip will work. That is not a function of the variance in speed. The other thing is that it's probably going to be a little cheaper to run a single ASIC. You provide a very, very solid backup should the number of clusters that exist fail, or should there be some bug in the the clustering code that causes cluster time lords to have issues and have hiccups. And also, should that happen, falling back to a single ASIC, which is marginally slower, is way better than falling back to 260K IPS, which would slow the chain down and cause just timing and signage point issues. And so, it is not, it's not a JV varsity type situation. It's just that, we want to distribute these fairly. We also want to be clear that there is a small advantage to running a cluster of them. And then I saw another question in the same vein about why 1 ASIC per host. That's not necessarily a rule, but you are producing with these VDFs partials, and then the host computes a proof from the rest of the partial. And so it still has to be a pretty, decently speed host underneath of it, and so that the fastest pattern is a host per ASIC card.
Yeah, getting a couple questions about I believe a recent tweet on cosmic radiation bit flipping fun.
Yes. So hypothetically, if you were going to send a hard drive based cryptographic proof mechanism to low Earth orbit, or say a nearby astral body, say like a moon, you would need to counter radiation. Radiation outside of the ionosphere on this planet is actually really, really strong. It's one of the main considerations they have for most spacecraft that are designed for human beings, to keep the radiation off of your bodies and away from you, because it's super intense gamma radiation and other kind of ray bursts the ionosphere of this planet protects you from. You do not have that if you put a hard drive with a bunch of Chia plots up there. And so consensus gets funny when your bits can just be flipped randomly by the stuff that makes the Hulk. And so considering how to make consensus rigid while outside of the ionosphere of this planet has been a fun exercise, and may prove to have real world benefits in a coming announcement.
Awesome. Will the S1 filing be turned public prior to the final registration?
That's how the process works. We are probably actually going to try to turn it public sooner than you would if you were just doing a kind of classic IPO. But there are some more things that we want to get complete before we do that.
Awesome. Here's one I really like. Pretty interesting answer for it too, I believe. When is AI going to be able to write GeoLisp?
Yeah, that's a project that myself, Matt, Jeff, a few other people internally here are working on now. We're engaged with the large language model teams at two of our partner companies, Microsoft, which is GitLab, and then Google, which runs Bard. We've also reached out to the ChatGPT team. Haven't been able to get someone on the phone there, but if anybody's listening that knows them, happy to chat with them as well. We are brand agnostic here. We are working on how to build good models for writing actual working programmable GeoLisp. Right now, a lot of the models spit out things that look right but do not have proper tails, do not have proper lock logic. So just like the details are missing, the gist of it's there, but the details are wrong. And so our most talented GeoLisp engineers and myself are working on how to build a data training set, and we would love community involvement in this. So this is something I actually want to have been meaning to set up a meeting with you and your team about, Eric. But we want to build a training set, teach it what good GeoLisp looks like, build a parameter and a problem set that the LLMs can then generate good answers for. And that's basically where we get to like Turing completeness or whatever with the codes that's being generated from an LLM. We're not there yet, but we are building bridges to it. I would say we're probably a couple months out from seeing real progress on that, but that's just because right now we're in the stage of collating data and like figuring out how to build good problem sets that we can then get verifiable answers from a large language model.
Awesome. Has it been a stormy process getting the Time Lords up to full speed?
Not stormy, no. I think that we intentionally did the diligence on testnet. We did months and months of testing. We had probably Cameron can testify to this, hundreds of meetings about Time Lord rollout and planning and making sure that things were going to go the way we planned them to. And then we ran it in the lab for a bunch of smaller test nets and then on testnet 10. So it's been going really well. And it's actually, if you pay attention to the announcements, we said we'd be ramping them up for December. We were so ahead of schedule. Everything worked so well. We're probably going to be done in like 3 weeks. So that's awesome. It's like a testament to the engineering team we have here, the code they've written, the software they put together. And then, obviously the guys on my team who are doing the labor, like Chris, who is, ramping the Time Lords up at midnight every night. This team is amazing, and they continue to astound me with what they can accomplish.
Any updates on carbon markets and everything going on there?
So quite a few of the remaining registries that have committed to the CAD Trust are in the final stages. Expect some news there. And then that's driving some next stage conversations about more tokenization. So you should expect quite a bit of news out of that market for kind of Q4. We haven't been talking about that as much because one of the major challenges we have with the investment community is to show them that there are interesting things that are not carbon markets. And so you've seen things like in the luxury goods market, we're starting to do more marketing and selling based on some late stage prospects. Additionally, some supply chain opportunities, and a couple banks are looking at various projects. And so from that perspective, we're really focused on those. But the kind of meat and potatoes is likely to be both the CAD Trust items and the ongoing tokenization soon.
Awesome. All right. Keep those questions coming, folks. Okay, yeah. Let me ask this one here. I'm just trying to find it real quick. Rollups can introduce compromises in performance. Do we have any thoughts on that? I mean, I think you kind of already answered that a little bit with your comment about payment channels being, the path to L2, but do we have any more elaboration we can give?
Yeah, I mean, look, Ethereum's over-indexed on rollups, and I get it. It's in some ways more practical with centralized monolithic smart contracts. We don't have those. You can recreate those with singletons, right? And so that's why when you think about things like data layer and NFTs, that rollups may be the better answer. But if you're talking about fungible money and high-speed trading, it's going to be payment channels. So the nice part though is we do both really well. So to the extent that there's real development in the Ethereum L2 world, there's no stopper to bringing that kind of technology immediately back to the Chia blockchain, just with the GeoLisp method and flow, right?
Cool. All right. I think that about wraps it up for us. We're 7 minutes before the hour, so we're pretty good on time here. thank you all for coming. It's been a great time. This is the first one I've hosted, so thank you for the patience with hiccups along the way. But yeah, thank you all, and we'll do another one of these sometime very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys. Have a great.
See y'all on X and Discord and,
Everywhere.